Hello, this is Glenn Sizemore from the Hope First Church of God at P.O. Box 404, Mount Sterling, Kentucky, 40353. And our hope is to bring Jesus Christ into your life. We hope you enjoy our programs, and we hope you enjoy our services, and I trust that God will do something in your life. I pledge allegiance to the Bible, God's holy word. I will make it a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path, and I will hide its words in my heart, that I might not sin against God. And if you will remain standing with me, I want to read these 3 verses. As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. My soul thirsteth for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my meat day and night, while they continually say unto me, where is thy God? You may be seated. David was, boy, I tell you, I'd love to see our nation get in this shape. What a change would we make today if a deer, I have a little old place up in Estill County up on top of a hill, and I was standing there with my son one day, and I heard something coming through the woods, and I thought it might have been a big dog or something like that, and Ryan was kind of small, and boy, I tell you, I thought, I'm going to have to kill somebody's dog here because it's heading right toward me. But then out of the trees came a deer. And that deer was barely loping. I mean, it was foaming and slobbering. And in other words, it was just about run to death. And I figured that some dogs had ran it. And anyway, it run on by and went on its way. But it didn't even... It was within me to Brother David of us, and it just went right on by us. It was weary, and it was tired, and I know it was thirsty. And David said, as the deer panteth for water. You know, I think after the water brooks, how that when you're thirsty, the only thing you think about is just getting a good, cool drink of water. That's always on your mind, folks. I remember I went one time with my dad picking blackberries, and that's July. And we got up there, and I thought, I'll pick this bucket full in a couple hours, and I'll be home. Well, it wasn't that lucky. I was there till about 1:30 or 2 o'clock with a long-sleeve flannel shirt on in the hot sun, and I was thirsty. And that's all I thought about from about 10 o'clock on. All I could think about was water. I wish that we could get in this situation and think about God and wanting to have communications with God like this. Man, would it change things? You know, after a drought, you know, we long for the rain. When we're deprived from water, that's what we're thinking about. And I got to also believe this about God. I got to believe, folks, when we're without God, somewhere along the line, I'm believing that the longer we stay without God's blessing in our nation, one of these days we're going to rise up and we're going to miss it. And we're going to hunt for it. And we're going to want it. Somehow I just got to believe that. I believe as a human being that we have been in injustice for so long, so many years of injustice, that we're wanting some justice to be done. And we're seeking for God. David was not seeking his ease. He wasn't seeking pleasure in life. He wasn't seeking his friends, brother. He was seeking fellowship with God. That will ease our pains tonight, folks, is to have fellowship with God. If you're in fellowship with God as you go along the way, there's a lot of things that you won't want to do. Brother, if you're living close to Jesus Christ, you're not going to want to curse and use God's name in vain. If you live close to Jesus Christ every day, you're not going to want to lie and steal and be greedy. If you'll stay close to Jesus Christ every day in your life, my friend, there's so many things in life you're not going to want to do. You're going to want to stay away from the sin business. David was longing for God. He had been away from the fellowship so long, and his soul was crying out for just a touch of the divinity and the divine God that David knew as a child. He was hungry for the Lord. And I hope tonight that America gets hungry for God. I want us to be like this deer that was panting for the water. I want us to want this communication with God and to walk with Him. You see, living a life without faith, after a while, it just kind of destroys us, my friend, and we look for Him. But give David his God. Give David communion with his God, and his soul is content. I'm going to tell you today, in this time of uproar, if we have our souls right with God, we are in a contented spirit. I'm not in an uproar about things in life. Brother, I'm contented to know that I'm in the hands of God, and that God is going to take care of Glenn Sizemore. Whatever I go through, I want to hold on to Him. If it's a rough patch in my way, I want to hold on to God. If it's an easy road, I still want to hold on to God. How joyous it must have been for David to have this craving for God and then to get it filled. I'll tell you, I was working one time on the part-time for a moving company up in Dayton, Ohio, one Saturday, and it was hot. And we were thirsty, and the house that we were moving these people into didn't have the water turned on. And there was a kid come by there, and I looked at him and I said, "Son, do you want to make $1?" And he said, "Doing what?" And I said, "If you'll go to your house over there and get me a pint jar of good cold water, I'll give you $1." That was before water was for sale. And he said, he saw me coming. This kid, I'd say this kid's in business. He said, "No, but I'll do it for $2." I said, "Go get it." He could have got 3 out of me if he'd have just tried long enough. But I was thirsty. And brother, when he brought that water there, everybody lined up. "Save me a drink of that. Save me a drink of that." I told that boy, I said, "After I drink this, you can sell them boys one." But the thing I'm trying to tell you is, I was thirsty. I wanted that water, and I was so content as that water was going down. Man, I felt good. And that's the way it is with God. And I think that we need to get to that point, that we need to pray, "God, help me to thirst after you. Help me to want you more than anything else in life." And then I looked at verse 3 here, and it said, "My tears have been my meat day and night, while they continually say unto me, Where is thy God? Where is thy God?" The world looks at us sometimes, my friend, that we say we're Christians and we are acting so down and out like we don't have a friend in the world. And the world says, "Where's your God? Where's this God you've been talking about?" And then I see people that say they are a Christian and they're sitting around cursing and using God's name in vain. And the world looks and says, "Where's your God?" I hope today that when the world looks at us that they don't have to say that. But someone asked and said, "Glenn, how can you preach about faith this year after so many events last year has took place that no doubt has affected your faith?" No, I still know God's in heaven. I just get aggravated at the devil sometimes, but I know that God's still there, and I know that God can handle this. Whatever we're going through, my friend, I remind you, when Jesus Christ came to save the world, He didn't pick a time when everybody was at peace. Brother, He picked a time that the worst of the kings was, the worst of the kingdoms was in charge. It was the Roman kingdom. They was the fiercest and the meanest and the cruelest kingdom that there was. And Daniel described them. And when Jesus came, He didn't sit down and say, "Well, let me wait till a better kingdom comes along." Brother, it didn't bother Him because He knew He had the power over everything. And he came right in the midst of this vicious Roman Empire. And he set up a kingdom that the writer Daniel said it was a stone hewed out of the mountain without hands. And it filled the whole earth. And it was a kingdom that destroyed all the other kingdoms. And there'd never be one that would overtake it. And Jesus Christ didn't worry about it. I don't worry about the things of the world, the times of the world. But I do worry about how we do in church, how we doing with God. Do we trust Him in times such as we have? Hold on to Him. Someone said, how can you believe, I've read where people will say, how can you believe in a good God when there's so much evil around? How can you believe in justice when there's so much injustice? How can you believe in loving God when there's so much hate going on in the world? How can you believe in a merciful God when there's so much misery going on in this world? Well, my friend, listen. I believe in God. But I'm telling you this, God's not going to keep man from having to suffer from his mistakes. Brother, when you do these things, God's not going to, I can't get out here and do a bunch of sin and then God curb it before I ever have an effect to feel it. I promise you one thing tonight, you will reap what you sow. That is a divine order from God. And when people look at us and say, where now is God in the situations of our world? When COVID come out, they say, where's God at now? Why didn't God say, why didn't man do something to curb it? Why don't we get along one with the other? And you see, that's what bothers me, is why people were saying, what on earth is God doing? God said, what in heaven is people doing? And that's the way it ought to be, you see. David must have experienced something like this when he said, my tears have been my meat day and night. And they continually say, where is thy God? Brother, listen, I'll tell you where my God's at. He's on the throne. I'll tell you something else about my God. He's still in charge. There ain't nothing going to get by him. And I hope that God hasn't given up on America. I've said I believe he has, but I hope he hasn't. But I'll tell you this, if God hasn't given up on America, we'll rise. And we will rise if he's not given up on us. And I trust that we are praying that he will. But David experienced a loneliness without God in his life. Oh, my friend, listen tonight. What we need is not more of the economical opportunity programs. We need to get just a companionship with God. And we need to know him in our prayer life to where we don't have to worry about when we pray how long we've been in prayer, but we just talk to the Lord about our lives. I'll tell you what the church needs in times like this. We need men and women that will have clear thinking. Brother, we need to think clear in these times in which we live. Brother, I believe that that's how we survived down through the centuries, is we didn't just go off the deep end and do whatever come first. We did some thinking and some praying about things. Church, we need some thinkers today. If you'll think about the situation and how we can get out of it, it'll lead you to God. It'll lead you to God every time. Brother, listen, follow the light and it'll lead you to the sun. I don't care where you're at, what it is. I don't accept this quantity over quality. Some people do. Brother, you can have a house full. If you've got vexations and spirits, you ain't got much. But if you got a few and they are in harmony and unity with one another, you got something. God still wants to work. He don't have to have 10,000 people to do his work. He can do it through 2 or 3 where we're gathered together in his name. And let's remember that tonight. Where is God? Brother, my soul, David said, panteth for God. When they're saying, where is he? Our soul panteth with him. And one thing you and I have tonight, my friend, that's good for us, we have the option to choose. Brother, that's one of the things that we've got to use correctly. That's why we got to think. It's because we can choose, and what we choose, we best choose right. Your choices establish your morality. The choices you make in life establishes your morals. If you choose to go with the wrong crowd, your morals will go down. If you choose alcohol and drugs and that crowd, then your morals are going to go down. And people are going to think of you as being one of them. I don't know tonight how you feel, but brother, after I got saved, it took some people a long time to believe I was saved. It took people a long time to know that. But you see, if we did not have a freedom of choice, you ever think about it? If you didn't have a freedom of choice, you wouldn't have any responsibility. Do you know that? You wouldn't be responsible. If you didn't have freedom to choice, to choose, you wouldn't have no responsibility on your life. All we would have would be like animals. We'd have an instinct to do something. But you see, we have the freedom to choose, and then because of that freedom to choose, we have to take the responsibility of what we have chosen. If God never gave us the reasoning factor or the choice or the freedom to choose, there wouldn't be any responsibility in our life. We'd be just like a robot. We'd do whatever we were programmed to do. But God gives us a choice, and He shows us all of the good things that He can do. He gives us His Word. He gives us a church to live in. And church, let's be excited about God. Let's be excited about Him. Let's thirst after Him. Let's thirst after Him like the deer that without the water seeks after God. Let's seek after Him. He'll help us. He's waiting to help us. And sometimes I believe God lets things like this happen to us just to get His church to wake up. And brother, we need to wake up today because sin is everywhere. I don't know when this virus is going to stop, but I know one thing, it's aggravating the life out of me almost. Every time you get things going real good, something will pop up with it. And I'm not going to be defeated of it. I'm not going to let this defeat me. I'm going to go on. And I don't know what God has got in store, but I'm just going to stick to His plan. Whatever His plan is, the parts of His plan I don't know, I still believe they're good. And I still believe they're worth holding on to. And I'm still going to hold on to them. But the thing about it is, only a small thinking person will try to make God the scapegoat for all these human failures. You know? Brother, people are always trying to make God the scapegoat. Well, if God was God, why did this happen or why did that happen? Folks, listen, God gives us the choices in life to make, and we make some choices that brings the wrath of God upon us. We make some choices that brings hurt and pain upon us by making those choices. And yet we can't blame God for those. We can only blame ourselves, you know. We can just blame ourselves. The planets are still moving, folks, just like they always were. The orbit, the moon still reflects the rays of the sun. The moon still keeps the ocean in control. The sun still gives us life-breathing light upon our earth and upon our plants and gives us life, and so does the rainfall and supports that, just like God planned it, you see. And He gives us these stars to look out at night and beautify heaven. I can see God in nature as well as I can see Him in the book, my friend, because I know He's there. I can get out and I can see the things of God, and I think, my goodness, why in this world do people not believe in God? People will say, well, this made this, and the atheist will always try to tell you how about everything here water made, but they won't tell you who made the water. You know, they won't say nothing about that. Well, water made the Grand Canyon. I'll tell you what made the Grand Canyon is my Lord and my Savior, Jesus Christ. God made that. That's part of the earth that God made, and He made it just like it is, and He made the heavens to glorify Him. And this evening, all we need to do, church, is to get a hold of God and cry out for Him and thirst after Him. We need a thirst for God in our land today, and everything will be all right. You know, no meteorite has ripped the earth apart yet. They make these movies and, there's a comet coming that's going to blow the earth apart. Brother, as long as God's on the throne, until God says it's over, it ain't going to be over. When God says it's over, it is. And we need to trust Him for that. And we need to as the world says, where is your God? Just tell Him He's on the throne. He's on the throne. He's long-suffering. He's long-suffering toward us. Long-suffering, longer than you and I would ever be with people. But God is. He's long-suffering. It is the way man has treated the earth is the reason a lot of these gardens have turned into deserts. It's the way we've treated it, my friend, that causes a lot of the problems. If someone would say, I no longer believe in man, I'd say, well, I agree with you. I agree with you. But to blame it on God and say, I no longer believe in God because of the things that man has done, friend, I don't understand that tonight at all. God's real, and He's real in our lives. And if you don't believe me, take time out of your life and pray to Him. Talk to Him, and God will show you that He's still in charge. But yet, I've seen very few people that's this thirsty for God. I have seen very few people that are this thirsty for our Lord. Brother Champ Rice used to talk about, when I talked to Brother Champ, it was always the Lord was in almost every sentence he would make. And he'd say, we was at the grocery store, and then he'd bring up something about the Lord. We were at this service station, bring up something about the Lord. Old Brother Champ Rice was always talking about the Lord, always praying. Brother Champ told me one time, he said, Brother Sizemore, he said, when we used to have revivals, he said, we spent hours in prayer for revivals. And he said, we would pray and we would pray. And we would pray for revival. And he said, lost people would come. And lost people would get saved. And old Brother Champ Rice in those hills of western North Carolina, old Brother Champ Rice was known well around the Asheville area, because he traveled those hills and he would preach to people. He would talk to them about the Lord. It didn't matter where they were at. He talked to them about the Lord, and they knew Brother Champ. It didn't matter what the name was over the church. It didn't matter if it was a Methodist or a Presbyterian or a Baptist or a Church of God or a Pentecostal. Champ Rice was preaching in all of them because they knew him as the mountain evangelist. And he was a person that told people about God. And friend, we need some of these today that sought after God. Brother Champ would tell me about times that they'd just gather and pray. They'd just gather and pray. People would come around and they'd say, Brother Champ, what are you doing tonight? And Brother Champ said, well, I ain't doing nothing much. They said, after supper, why don't a bunch of us come around and get together to pray? When have you heard that? Huh? We may come over to your house and watch television. We may come over and watch the Wildcats play. We may come over and watch a football game, or we may come over and watch something else. But when have you heard somebody say, if you ain't doing nothing now, let's gather around, let's just have a prayer session? And I thought, my goodness, we have lost so much by not communing with our Lord and our God. You know, life is not a game, folks. It's not a game of solitaire. We depend on each other, and that's why we all have to pray. You know, we're not solitary in this thing. You know, hey, people can make a machine here that can put 1,000 people out of work. I got to thinking on a baseball game. I was watching a baseball game one time, and this fella made an error. And you know what? It cost the whole team the game. One error. I was watching a football game, and one of the linemen jumped off line. It penalized the whole team. They moved them backward. Well, why don't they just make him move back 5 yards and let him play back there? Huh? They don't do it that way. They penalize the whole team. You know, make him go back there 5 yards. He's the one done it. The other team didn't do it. But they are gathered around him. Folks, listen, we are gathered around each other. We depend on each other. And we need to remember that tonight more than anything else. You know? I don't know, but I know an infected little finger can kill this whole body. You know that? It can kill the whole body. This is why we need to hold on to God. You see, we've got to start thinking clearly. This is a time that calls for drastic thinking, church. Be careful. Do some thinking. Think and then pray. Think and then read your Bible. Think and then witness. But we need to think today. No one would think of sowing corn, you know, and hoping to get watermelons from it. How can we think we can do bad and do evil and do sin and do wrong and expect God to make it right? If you plant corn, you're going to get corn. You plant watermelons, you're going to get watermelons. You're going to reap whatever you sow. And if you sow into the wind evil, you're going to reap evil. And it's going to come to you sometime or another. And you will reap it, my friend. I don't care what. Just as sure as you keep eating that, well, I guess I could say, you keep eating that old fried, salty country ham, one of these days that heart's going to go boom. You can't say, why did God do that? You can say, why did I eat all that old ham? And I love it. You keep on eating those big old chocolate cakes. You'll step on the scale and it'll say what you don't want it to say. You can't say, well, how did this happen? You see, gaining weight is a pleasure, but losing weight is a discipline. My friend, listen. Prayer is a discipline. But if you'll discipline yourself and get close to God, I promise you one thing. You'll never regret it as long as you live. How can we expect a life of justice when everything is unjust? How can we expect a life of loving and friendship when everything is hatred and misery out there? We've got to get our souls out of this mode the world puts us in and pushes us in. People everywhere are asking, what happened? What happened to the church? What happened to the church services like they used to be? What happened to the religion or the Christians? Well, they're still around, and I'm glad for that. They're still around. But you know what? I'd love to see revival take place. I'd love to see a revival take place in Hope, that men and women would think about God, and they'd think, what my neighbor needs is God. What I need to do is to make sure that when I stand before God, and as I said this morning, my friend, one of these days He's going to come for the fruit. And He's going to come for the fruits of His vineyard that He's loaned to us. He's going to come and ask for His payment. And what kind of fruits are we going to have? You see, this is important. It'd be more, people say, well, how can you not believe in God? How can people believe that this earth come from a big bang that was smaller than the head of a pin and all of this come out of it? It would be more believable if someone spilt a bottle of ink and it formed the Constitution of the United States. It'd be more believable than believing this Big Bang Theory. You know? I'll never forget what old Spurgeon said one time. Spurgeon said, someone come along and told him, he said, man, that's a beautiful watch. Where did you get it? And Spurgeon said, well, it made itself. He said it just was nothing but just a cog, and it was laying here on the ground, and lightning struck it, and said it come into a bunch of pieces together, and said the wind blew them pieces together, and they began to work, and he said all of a sudden, he said out of somewhere, it blew up some glass and put it on the case, and he said 2 lizards was going along and laid down and died right beside of that watch and made the belt. He said, now, isn't that wonderful? And the fellow said, well, I ain't going to believe that. And he said, well, you believe the earth come from a big bang. This is far more believable than that. But yet, we want to believe what we want to believe. But friend, I'm going to tell you now, where's our God? Where's God at in your life? And we'll say this, and then Ann's going to come. Where is God in your life? And let's talk about this just for a minute. Where is God at in your life? What is your relationship with God right now? Where's it at? You know, I'm going to tell you, God is seen in justice. God is seen in love. If this world is violent and ruthless, if you're violent and ruthless, we won't see God in you. But where does God rate in your life tonight? Where is God at in your life? If you're grading your life on elementary or school in years, you know, where would God be? Would you be in kindergarten? Would you be in college? Would you be in elementary school? Would you be in high school? Would you be in middle school? Where is your relationship and your level with God at right now? Folks, it needs to be full. You need to have a full relationship with God. You need to be doing everything you can to get closer to God. And all of us need to say, Lord, I'm going to get closer to you. I'm going to talk to you more. I'm going to pray more. And I'm going to close with this. I had the little fellow in Irving there that he was a pretty mean little old rascal. He had 4 or 5 children, and boy, he was just a little rascal. That guy was, and he got saved. I mean, the boy got saved. And brother, when he would come home at night and he'd get out of that automobile, the first thing he'd do is raise both hands to heaven. And he'd get out of the house that morning and get to his car, he'd raise both hands to heaven. No matter where he was at, if something come up, he'd raise both hands to heaven. And one of my board members at Irving said, "What's wrong with him?" I said, "Buddy, he's eat up with Jesus Christ." You see, we're getting to the point now we don't even know a God-filled man or a woman in life. We think they're in the loony bin because we lift our hands to God. Where does God? I don't care what people think of me on that level as long as God thinks I'm good. I don't mind what people say about me. I really don't. Because I just want God to know that I know He's there. And I know that I'm trusting Him with my life. David said, "My meat has been my tears." Wow. Wow. When's the last time we prayed with tears? When's the last time that we prayed with tears running down our cheeks? I hope tonight that we realize that there ain't nothing going on in our world that God can't handle. There ain't nothing happening that's going to blow us out of the universe. Let's trust Him. And let's seek after Him. As David said, "My soul seeketh after God like a deer seeketh after the brooks of water." We thank you for listening to our program today, and I hope and trust that you learned something and that God has spoke to your heart. And I trust that you will become a better person by just listening.